David Peak with the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, and we're going to go over trauma-informed care, not only for those that we are serving, but also for ourselves. This is a very tough field to be in, and especially with coordinated entry and case management, we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves uh, to avoid burnout and stress fatigue. So our agenda, we're going to go over just some trauma overview, trauma and homelessness, principles of trauma-informed care, secondary trauma, trauma-informed self-care, and then when we meet in person, we'll go over some questions that anyone may have about it if there is, and go over some conclusions. So there's three different types of trauma. Acute trauma stems from one isolated or single event, such as an automobile accident. Chronic trauma is prolonged experience with trauma stressors, such as illness of a loved one. We also see this a lot in people that have been in either emotionally or physically abusive relationships. And then complex trauma comes from multiple events, often overlapping or in succession. Also, with victims of violent crime, losing housing, abuse, things like that, where they build up over time and cause some long-lasting effects. With common causes of homelessness, there's a lot of overlap and circular events that come with this. So a lot of trauma can lead to homelessness, and that can cause further trauma as well. So post-traumatic stress. The effects of past trauma can cause long-term recurring issues, making it hard to cope with daily life, including work, relationships, and finding housing. Domestic violence, foreclosure, a lack of income can cause people to lose their homes. Businesses being foreclosed, people lose their income, and that can lead to homelessness as well. Following up, loss of job or income, that comes from that as well. Mental illness. Mental illness can cause people to lose their jobs and lose their income, but it can also cause them to do things that would get them evicted, such as drugs and alcohol abuse, acting in ways that go against the policies of where they're renting, things like that. Addiction, again, that follows with the last one with mental illness. Those two are tied hand in hand very often. Runaway and homeless youth. Youth that run away from their homes don't have a steady place to go to after that. They can couch surf. They often end up on the streets. Breakdown of relationships. You can have relationships that break down, divorce, family relationships. We see this often where someone leaves because they can't live with their family, whether it's an abusive family or they themselves are in a place where the family has to remove them. Grief can cause a withdrawal, experience mental health addiction issues, and inability to work. Some people lose focus. And then despair. Many experience long-term homelessness or feel helpless and unworthy of being secure. This can also stem from long-term trauma and abuse or mental health issues. So you can see how any of these things can lose to loss of jobs, just giving up, and where that can become circular right there, because in a lot of these can either cause homelessness or be caused by homelessness. So what other types of trauma could be associated with these? It's just something to think about as you go through your day. As I said, a lot of times this is circular. So experiencing mental health crisis increases your likelihood of experiencing homelessness. And then homelessness often leads to poor mental health due to traumatic experiences, lack of safety, and just being homeless in itself. There's 6 guiding principles to a trauma-informed approach. The CDC's Office of Public Health Preparedness and Response, in collaboration with SAMHSA's National Center for Trauma Informed Care, led a new training for OPHPR employees about the role of trauma informed care during public health emergencies. The training aimed to increase responder awareness of the impact that trauma can have in the communities where they work. Participants learned SAMHSA's 6 principles that guide a trauma-informed approach, including safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice, and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. Adopting a trauma-informed approach is not accomplished through any singular, particular technique or checklist. It requires constant attention, caring awareness, sensitivity, and possibly a cultural change at an organizational level. Ongoing internal organizational assessment and quality improvement, as well as engagement with community stakeholders, will help to embed this approach, which can be augmented with organizational development and practice involvement. The training provided by OPHPR and NCTIC was the first step for CDC to view emergency preparedness and response through a trauma-informed lens. With coordinated entry especially, we have a very limited time. So how can we do these things in maybe 5 minutes of building rapport before we start asking some pretty personal questions? So looking at these principles a little bit, we want to look at safety. So we want to make sure that they feel not only physically, but emotionally safe to open the way they may not normally. So we want to make sure that from the bat, we're smiling, we're looking at people with positive regard. Trust and transparency. We want to be honest about the process. We want to set realistic expectations, explain how we use the information, and people are much more likely to open up if they know exactly why we're asking these questions and that we're telling them. This will open a door. This may not get you directly into a project right away, but we want to start that chain of events. Peer support. So we don't have time to do peer support and coordinated entry. But this is where it's great if people can do the coordinated entry assessment with people that they already know and trust. But if not, we need to treat participants as peers rather than clients. So we get rid of the perceived power dynamic relationship, and we can feel more as equals, and people were much more likely to open up. Collaboration and mutuality, again, building that relationship and rapport. The word we goes a long way. Feeling of working together to get through tough times helps the participant to feel less overwhelmed and less alone. So saying things like, what we're going to do is have a conversation. I'm going to ask you some questions. I like to tell them this may get a little bit personal. You are able to, at any point, decline answering any questions. However, we do want to get the most information possible to get the best snapshot of where you're at. Empowerment and autonomy. Again, allowing participants to have a say in their process through informed consent and the option to decline those questions. We have a far less resistance to asking personal questions if they know they can skip them. Cultural, historical, and gender issues. Using knowledge and empathy to see situations through the lens of our participants' unique experiences, we can be at our best to assist with cultural competence and kindness. Understanding how important that can be to those we serve should be a cornerstone to trauma-informed care and service to others. This is another one, just allowing people to be seen and to, even if it's not spoken, to know as much as you can what their history, their gender, their race, how that may have affected them throughout the years is really helpful in gauging how questions should be asked, and also just knowing where that history is. So I want to get a little into our heads. Vicarious trauma or secondary trauma is caused by repeated exposure to the traumatic stories of others. Providers often find themselves feeling as if they've experienced the trauma themselves. It often leads to compassion fatigue or burnout if not recognized and self-care is not applied. This is especially true in our field, I believe, because a lot of us come from traumatic experiences ourselves, whether it's lived experience of homelessness, we've been through addiction or abuse, whatever our past is, we're hearing a lot of those stories. A lot of it is reflected in the stories of those we serve. So we want to make sure that we are guarding ourselves and being very self-aware of how we're handling this. So some of the symptoms are intrusive thoughts, cognitive changes, emotional distress, emotional or compassion fatigue, hypervigilance, physical symptoms, or avoidance. And you'll notice these are a lot of the same effects that come from firsthand trauma. Because of hearing these, we do take those on. We are caring people. That's why we got into this field. And a lot of times we just really bring in those emotions ourselves. And we have to be very careful to not burn ourselves out. We need to be trauma informed for us. Parts of self-care is to be aware of your own mind, checking in with ourselves as well as reaching out to supports. This quote from Eleanor Brown: rest and self-care are so important. When you take time to replenish your spirit, it allows you to serve from the overflow. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. But I'm too broke or busy to do self-care. I don't know how many times I've said this, but take a look at these. These are free and only take a few minutes. Sit in the car. If you have headphones, just sit on your phone or not. Annoy other people with your music. I don't care. Enjoy a comfort snack. Take an extra 5 minutes in the shower. Drink some calming tea. Watch a nostalgic movie or TV show. Get some fresh air. Call or visit that friend that makes you laugh. And of course, if you have the opportunity, cuddle up with a pet. That always helps. And there's a lot of things that we can do that don't cost money, that don't take a lot of time. And I just wanted to show that we don't, as much as we like to, have excuses to not be able to do some form of self-care. It may not be big, but just something to give ourselves a little bit of emotional respite. So some of the key points: trauma-informed care is crucial in our field. Trauma and homelessness can be a cycle. Caring for those we serve must be done with trauma-informed history in mind. Watch for signs of secondary trauma and always practice self-care when you can. So the other piece we're going to get into a little bit is motivational interviewing for coordinated entry. Now, motivational interviewing is an evidence-based practice used to elicit communication and change. So we're going to go over how to use motivational interviewing in coordinated entry, the tools, and then just a little wrap-up. So it's mostly used in longer term situations. Case management, it's used a lot. This is used a lot in addiction and recovery. But we can use it in coordinated entry. It's a little bit trickier because we don't have the time to do this over long term. So it's just, we're going to look at how to use that in real time when we just have a few minutes to meet with someone. So ORS is one of the big skill sets in coordinated entry or in motivational interviewing. It's open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And there's some examples on here. So asking an open-ended question could be, what resources have you tried as far as finding a safe place to stay? Affirmations, just a strength statement, just an acknowledgement of something, some achievement. I'm glad you came in. It takes a lot of strength to ask for help. That's a big one for people. A lot of times, the people that we serve don't hear a lot of good things about themselves. So, really, a little affirmation can go a long way. Reflections are reiterating a statement in your own words, showing understanding of what the participant is saying. It's been a while since you've had a home and you're ready to find a place. It's just a way of knowing that they feel heard and seen. And summaries. A concise recap of conversation to establish understanding and segue to the next portion of the conversation. So as you're wrapping up the assessment, you can say something like, I'm hearing that you made a lot of great steps. Let's finish this up so we can get you one step closer to being housed. Whatever you feel like saying at that point, just something to kind of get into the next part. This is really great when you have someone that is a talker too, and you have other assessments to do later. Rule is another set in motivational interviewing, and I found this one really, really helpful for those of us that are fixers and don't just want to listen, we want to fix everything. Um, Resist telling them what to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do, and especially people that have been surviving on their own for years. We'll see this a lot in the folks that have been on the street for quite a while. Um, Telling them what to do doesn't exactly work the best. Understanding the motivation. Again, going back to that history, no, you're likely going to hear people talk about doing things you may not agree with. Try to understand why and listen without judgment. Listening with empathy. Listen to understand, not to respond. Taking a moment to express empathy and caring does a lot of good for our participants who may not have had much positive regard. And empowerment. Many of our participants have been in situations where they've not had a lot of choices or autonomy. Giving resources and fostering self-efficacy when possible helps a lot in that self-sustainability that we're looking for in our clients. So a quick conclusion, while motivational interviewing is normally used in longer term care, the rapport building properties work even in one-time interactions. Using ORS and rule will help you to build and maintain rapport quickly and efficiently, move that conversation forward. So what I want you to do is kind of reflect on these and any other tools that you have to build rapport. Which of these tools today that you feel is going to help you the most? And then please either email or when we meet in person, let me know if you have any questions. And that's the training for that. Again, please feel free to reach out at any time or save the questions for when we meet, and I'd be glad to go over those. Have a wonderful day.